CDC in 2018. These cases include things like SIDS, which is just sudden infant death syndrome, or other chronic conditions, physical impairments, terrible things like that, but there's also a ton of things that can be preventable. Careless parents who don't know how to set up a house right to take care of an infant, or just lack of supervision are a lot of these cases, and that's extremely unfortunate that we lose so many infants just from people being careless. A majority of people in this room, I imagine, will either be parents one day or they'll have someone close to them who will be like a sibling. So it will be your duty one day to know how to childproof a home or know when conditions are unsafe. Since I've talked about my little brother Nathaniel before, he's 6, I've actually been through the childproofing process of our house twice now with my little sister and then my little brother. And so actually seeing all of it that goes into how to childproof, all the little nitty-gritty details that you wouldn't think of, really puts it into perspective how scary it is to realize one day I'm going to have to be a parent and have to look after my children and go through this process myself. I'm going to give you 3 steps on how to childproof a home, and those 3 steps are going to take place in 3 different rooms in the house. We're going to begin with the kitchen common area. This is just a typical basic kitchen. Features things like a sink, a refrigerator, stove, electrical plug-ins, lots of little cabinets, cleaning supplies, just the usual day-to-day things that we all use. There can be a lot of choking hazards in common living spaces, like on the living room if you have batteries and remotes or caps that aren't totally secure. A lot of little things that we don't necessarily notice but make a big difference later on when you have to worry about childproofing. Now things when you have, let's say, like a stove or a refrigerator, these are pretty heavy objects, but we don't usually think about anchoring them to the walls or think about your living room too. Things like TVs or the TV stands that you use. When an infant starts walking, they want to stand up and use whatever they can to start toddling around, so they're going to go for things like cabinet drawers and the handles of refrigerators, because that's what they're going to use to stand up. So when they pull on that, doors can open like cabinet drawers, or things can even fall on them, like stoves. There's been cases of infants walking around in the living room when their parents have their back turned, and they'll walk up to the TV and grab the side of it to pull themselves up, and then it falls on top of them. So now that we've talked about a few of the dangers, here are measures you can take to prevent things like those cabinet drawers opening. So one of the big problems when an infant is able to pull open those drawers is there's things like knives, cutlery, kitchen, cleaning supplies. So we have to be able to prevent the infants from being able to get a hold of that, because if that's ingested, any cleaning agents, that can be horribly deadly. I'm sure you've all heard about the Tide Pod incidents, and imagine an infant going through that not knowing what they're doing. It's terrible. So these are cabinet locks. So you install the top part to latch in with the bottom. So when the door is shut, this hook stops it from being opened. It has to be pulled pretty forcefully so an infant isn't able to open it. And there's other locking mechanisms on the top for cabinets to make sure that they can't get into things. And then, as I mentioned, there's power strips or outlets in kitchens and other common living spaces. And that block on the top prevents toddlers or infants from being able to pull plugs and then insert things like forks or keys or anything terrible like that into outlets. So here is an example of a child-proof home. I'm going to give you guys a second just to think about the things I've already talked about common problems with living areas, and I want you to take note of the things that you think were done well in this, and then I'll come back and make note of some things. So I don't know if you noticed, but there's no large furniture items in this certain area. All of that has been moved out, so there's nothing an infant can pull on top of itself. And I can't see any power outlets, which I mean is a good problem to have. And all of the safe areas have been barricaded off, so that there's nothing that an infant that I can see can hurt themselves with. And now we're going to move to step 2, and that's how to child-proof your bathroom. And this can be an interesting task because there's a lot of things here that you also don't think of. When we think of drowning, we think of falling into a large, deep swimming pool and having something on you that you can't swim with, but for an infant, that can be as simple as a toilet bowl. They only need about 3 inches of water to actually suffocate and die. So these toilet locks are super useful because they're a pain in the butt. We had to use them in our house because you don't think about it sometimes, and you really got to go, and you just start pulling and nothing's happening, so that can be a pain. But it can save your infant's life, which is huge. According to Safe Kids Worldwide newsletter, Dr. Kaneshiro in 2018 made a statement that it only takes 140 degrees for 3 seconds. 140 degrees is less than the full blast of most bathtubs, and that can melt their skin off. And that's horrifying to hear, I know. But one thing you can do, according to WebMD in 2018, is you can go and you can manually set the highest temperature for the bathtub so that you can prevent that. And there's also things that you can do to prevent horrible things happening in the bathtub. Like, if you can see, they have kind of this plastic, almost like a mini bathtub that you can set in the bathtub itself. And this sort of works where there's water surrounding them, but they've only got a little bit of shallow water in them, and they can't flop their head to the side or fall forward or anything like that. So that just keeps them from being exposed in the big open water and being able to move very much. So now you've seen 3 different steps and 3 different rooms: common living areas, kitchen, and the bathroom. These are 3 of the hardest, in my opinion, places to have to childproof, because there's so many little things that you don't think of that can be so dangerous, but they aren't for us, like a toilet bowl. We've walked through the house together, and I hope you see the importance of all these little things and knowing that these can be dangerous, because one day either you'll have to worry about it or someone you know will have to worry about it, and it's just good information to have to know for one day to save an infant's life.